Warning: the following video contains personal opinions and may contain potential bias. Anyone sensitive to someone else's opinion may want to turn away now. But thanks for watching anyways. So we made it to Generation 3, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said in my Gold and Silver video, Generation 3 was another generation that I wanted to cover because there's just simply so much content that are in those generations. Like you most likely know, you got the main series games, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. You have the remakes of the Generation 1 games being Fire Red and Leaf Green. And you also have the spin-offs of XD, Gale of Darkness, and Pokemon Coliseum. Those three specific games, in my opinion, pretty much culminate what Generation 3 is. And they're some of the most famous Pokemon games in the entire franchise, just for what they've brought to the franchise as a total. There's a lot of things that Gen 3 did amazing, and a lot of things that Gen 3 didn't do too well. And I cannot wait to get into that. But before we do that, let's recap for a bit for the people that just got here. What this series is me getting all of the generations of Pokemon together and listing out the pros and the cons of that specific generation, whether that be from the main series games or the spin-offs or the anime or whatever that may be. And I'm doing this for two reasons. One, I am honoring the videos of the Silver League Networks, which is a Pokemon community that died like a couple years ago after their leader, Silver August, was caught doing a bunch of terrible things. And honestly, I just really like the idea of comparing and contrasting the good and bad things about a specific Pokemon generation, because it really helps to help you visualize what this generation stood for when it came out. Anyways, let's get to the pros and cons. Pro number 5. At my number 5 pro of Generation 3, I have the introduction of double battles, ladies and gentlemen. Double battles are such a very interesting concept, and yet it's so underutilized in the main series. Double battles by nature are much different and also much harder than single battles, because 9 times out of 10, your Pokemon are not designed or not built around double battles, because that's not what you fight most of the times. Most of the times you fight single battles, and therefore your teams in single battles aren't really going to translate well into the double battle area. And yet double battles add such a very interesting and complex layer to overall competitive battling. I mean, us as a Pokemon community, we have a literal category called the VGC to display how complex and intricate double battles can be. There's not really much to say about double battles without getting into like real VGC stuff. Double battles show that there are multiple ways of playing Pokemon battles that are not just the simple turn-based strategies. And it also shows that there are certain Pokemon that are good at specific parts of the game, and also Pokemon that are good at another part of the game. And one of the biggest examples of that, and probably the biggest example of that, is Incineroar. Incineroar is mediocre in single battles, but is an absolute, like, disgusting, vile creature in double battles. That thing is probably the best double battle Pokemon to ever exist in the goddamn history of VGC. I mean, dude, Wolfclick can literally give you like a 3-hour-long video on why this Pokemon is so good and why it terrorizes competitive gameplay. But at the number 5 spot, I got double battles. Pro number 4. On my number 4 pro, I have the Pokemon spin-offs XD, Gale of Darkness, and Pokemon Coliseum. I'm gonna start by saying this right now. There is not a better spin-off games than these two right here. Not Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, not Pokemon Stadium, not Pokemon Battle Revolution. There's not another Pokemon spin-off game that is better than Coliseum and XD Gale of Darkness. This game is super unique and super interesting. The story on both these games are incredible. The battling mechanics are super cool because everything is double battles and you have to change your teams according to double battles. And this has its pros and cons depending on how you feel about double battles. I personally really like it as someone who's been playing nothing but mainline Pokemon games and only plays single battles because that's what the main series throws at you 9 times out of 10. There are very few double battles that are very prominent, so playing something like Gale of Darkness and Coliseum where it's nothing but double battles is truly something interesting. If you can, please go out of your way and play these games. Buy a GameCube or a Wii that plays GameCube games, download an emulator and get the ROMs. Play these games. These are such a very interesting experience that you cannot get from any Pokemon game ever. So for our number 4 pro, I have Gale of Darkness and Coliseum. Pro number 3. For my number 3 pro, I have the introduction of EVs, IVs, and Natures all together. This is pretty self-explanatory, I think. DVs were cool in Generation 2, but let's be honest, they made a lot of Pokemon one note. They're really hard to understand, and the fact that you have to, like, tank a specific Pokemon stats in order to get a specific hidden power typing it's just really clunky and janky and honestly really unfair at certain parts. Eevees, Ivies, and Natures, they don't do you that dirty, okay? They're extremely easy to understand, and you don't have to purposely lower your IVs in order to get a specific hidden power typing. It's moved to a different sort of value. For IVs, you just either have to find a specific Pokemon in the wild with a good stats, or you can breed Pokemon in order to pass down those specific stats onto those other Pokemon. And with EVs, all you have to do is just knock out a specific type of Pokemon in order to get that sort of stat increase. EVs, IVs, and Natures make Pokemon a lot more versatile and makes team building a lot more interesting. Let's take Mew, for example. I know, kind of a really random pick. I chose Mew for this example because Mew is one of the very few rare Pokemon to have extremely well balanced stats. It has 100 across everything. With EVs, IVs, and Natures, you're able to turn this Mew into quite literally anything. You can turn it into a sweeper with max attack and max speed IVs. You can turn into some sort of fast tank to spread paralysis by putting EVs into speed and some sort of defense. You can just build a straight up tanky wall that spreads paralysis by putting everything into defense. And that's the real beauty about EVs and IVs and Natures. They make Pokemon so much more versatile that provides much more interesting and complex team building. And for my number 3 pro, I have EVs and IVs and Natures. Pro number 2. For my number 2 pro, I have the designs of Generation 3 Pokemon. In my humblest opinion, I think Generations 1, 3, and 4 are the 3 best generations when it comes to overall Pokemon designs. But I think Gen 3 etches out those other generations on a couple of Pokemon. The starters are all very, very strong. The early game Pokemon like Mightyena, Lanoon, Beautifly, and Dustox are really cool designs. Ludicolo, I love Ludicolo, it's really cool. Shiftry's pretty cool design. Gardevoir's phenomenal design. Breloom's really good. The Slacking line is really very interesting. The Ninjask and Shedinja Pokemon are really cool. Hariyama's cool. And then etc. You keep going. And even the Pokemon isn't interesting on paper design-wise, they have something about them that makes them interesting. Like Spinda is a very bad Pokemon, but there are about like a couple billion Spinda that actually exist that have very, very different designs, differentiating designs of them. Seviper and Zangoose might be kind of bad, but they're rivals and they fight each other a lot over territory. Solrock and Lunatone are very iconic Pokemon of Tay and Liza. Crawdon is really goddamn cool. Adaptability is a very strong ability. Milotic, extremely iconic. And that's what I'm getting at with this generation. It is a very, very strong generation with great designs and great concepts of Pokemon. And so for my number 2 pro, I have the phenomenal designs of Generation 3 Pokemon. Honorable mentions. I only have one honorable mention for Generation 3, and that is the absolutely phenomenal and amazing soundtrack that this game has. This is another personal opinion, but this game has the best soundtrack in the entire goddamn series. There are so many phenomenal tracks, like the surfing tracks, the wild Pokemon tracks, fighting legendary Pokemon, evil team boss fights. There are the tracks and the music in this game are so well composed and they're super catchy, and I just can't stop gushing about them. This game is the best game when it comes to actual soundtrack, and that's my only honorable mention. Now on to number 1. And the number 1 pro for Generation 3 is the Hoenn region being extremely heavy on exploration. Now, if I were to sit here and tell you every single small detail about where you can go and what you can do in the Hoenn region, we'd be here for like at least an hour. So I'm only going to be telling you about one specific thing you can do, and it's probably the most popular thing just because of how insane and cryptic it is, and that is catching the Regis. So in order to catch the Regis, this is exactly what you need. You need a Relicanth, a Wailord, a Pokemon with Dive, a Pokemon with Dig, and a Pokemon with Surf and Strength. Step 1. Go to Route 134. Surf east from Slateport and then southwest from Pacific Locktown to get to Route 134. Look for swirling currents. Navigate correctly until you find a dive spot and the calm water in the middle of the currents. Then dive down to the spot, go through the tunnel, and then surface inside the sealed chamber. Then you read the braille on the walls. The first room, it tells you to use Dig on the braille covered wall. Use Dig on the center of the real wall. This will open the second room. And then in the second room puzzle, you have to put Relicanth in the first slot of your party, and then put Wailord in the last slot of your party. Then go interact with the Braille message on the back wall. If done correctly, you'll see a rumble, and messages will say that the doors have opened elsewhere in the region. And now you're able to actually go ahead and catch the Regis. For Regirock, you go to Route 111 at the desert. Inside the ruin, you'll read the Braille on the wall. The solution, you walk 2 steps left, 2 steps down, and then use Rock Smash. The door will open, and then you'll be able to fight Regirock and catch it. For Regice, you go to the Island Cave. It's on Route 105, just south of Rustboro City. Inside the cave, read the Braille, and depending on what game you're playing, you have 2 different solutions. If you're playing Ruby or Sapphire, just sit there and wait for 2 minutes. I'm dead ass. Literally sit there and do absolutely nothing for 2 minutes. And then for Emerald, you have to do a full lap clockwise around the room, just straight up hugging the wall. The door will open, and then you'll be able to fight Regice there. And for Registeel, you have to go to Route 120, go south of Forestry City, and find the ruin on the hill. When you read the Braille, you go to the center of the room, and then use Fly. The door will open, and then you'll be able to fight Registeel. Now, all that might just sound like absolute utter nonsense to people that don't play Pokemon, because it kind of is. But what I'm trying to get at, though, is that these are so super random ways to catch Pokemon that you have no choice but to go out of your way and try and catch them. And that is the most important part, is doing all this crazy stuff and exploring the world around you, going around, going into random places that you never think or never even imagine going in, going around doing all these very cryptic things, and then being rewarded with extremely rare legendary Pokemon. And I love that about these games because it forces you to think outside the box, or in this case, look up goddamn tutorials, but it forces you to engage with the area and place around you. And there's multiple things like this in this game that allow you to do that. It's just that the Regis is like the most extreme example of that. But for my final pro, it's the overall exploration of Generation 3 in the Hoenn region. Now look, when it comes to things introduced and overall very specific Pokemon things, in my opinion, Generation 3 hit it out of the park when it comes to that stuff. The region is amazing. The Pokemon introduced is amazing. I didn't talk about them, but I really like Team Magma and Team Aqua. And all the other stuff around Hoenn is honestly really good. Now with that being said, these games aren't like completely immune to criticism, and there are a couple problems I do have with these games, which I'm going to get into right now. Con number 5. For my number 5 con, I have the unavailability of transferring Pokemon from Gold, Silver, and Crystal into the Gen 3 titles. Really? Why? What? Bro, this thing could have been so easy to implement. In the Generation 2 games and in the Generation 1 games, there are stations in the game for you to transport Pokemon from those games into the later generations. Like in Gen 1, you could transfer Pokemon in Gen 2, and Gen 2, you can transfer Pokemon in Gen 1. And that was super genius of them to do that. But they couldn't do it in these games? Why? What was literally stopping them? I guess you could say it's hardware, but at the same time, they have literal cables. Before we had Wi-Fi, and before you could just like trade wirelessly with people, you had literal, like, actual wires that you'd plug into the Game Boys to hook them together and connect and trade with them. They could have easily done something like that with the Game Boy Advance. They could have created, like, a special wire that you could hook up to your Game Boy Advance and to a Game Boy Color, and you could trade between them. So for my number 5 con, I have the unavailability of transferring Pokemon from the Gold, Silver, Crystal games into the Gen 3 titles. Con number 4. For my number 4 con, I have Fire Red and Leaf Green's very strange adaptations. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green up to this point mark very interesting points for Pokemon. These are the first ever Pokemon games to ever be remakes of other existing Pokemon games, Red and Blue. And when it comes to them being overall games, I think they're pretty okay. With that being said, however, the way how they adapt certain things is very strange. And before we actually continue on this point, I need to tell you guys the difference between a remaster and a reboot. All what a remaster is just taking the old game and porting it onto a new console with maybe a couple different features, like an emulation mode where you can make it go by much faster, or a couple of different mechanics, but that's really it. A whole remake is like a completely revamped version. Way more modern mechanics, better graphics, everything under the sun, even with more Pokemon at certain points. Fire Red and Leaf Green are definitely remakes, but with how they implement certain things, you would think they're remasters, which is extremely confusing to me. And the perfect way for me to explain this to you is the way how certain Pokemon are given to you. Like, for example, you can't get Crobat in this game. And Crobat is such a phenomenal evolution to the really bad Golbat. The way how you'd usually get Crobat in the Pokemon games is that you have to level up with very high friendship, However, in Fire Red and Leaf Green, because there's only the Kanto Dex until you beat the game, you literally cannot get Crobat until you beat the game. And that goes with all the other Generation 2 Pokemon, like Scizor, Espeon, Umbreon. Like, the original Gen 2 Pokemon, like, you know, the Gen 2 starters, Quagsire, all those other Pokemon, those make sense for the simple fact that, well, they're native to Johto. Okay, but these Pokemon that are evolutions of Generation 1 Pokemon, they should be in the main story of Fire Red and Leaf Green, but they're just not for some reason. And that's my number 4 problem. The fact that Fire Red and Leaf Green has very, very strange adaptations. Con number 3. For my number 3 con, I have the overall monotony of water routes. You know, in a game full of literal, just straight bodies and bodies of water with little pieces of islands on the actual region, you would think that these water routes would be pretty fleshed out, a lot more interesting. Well, with the exception with a very few handful routes, the majority of these routes are kind of similar in the way where, like, there's a bunch of the same Pokemon. Like, you'll find a bunch of Tentacools, you'll find a bunch of Carvanas and Whalmers, you'll find a lot of the same Pokemon here, and there's not that much exploration in some of these routes as well. Now, again, there are a handful of routes, like the one that's near Abandoned Ship is a very notable one, but again, those are, like, very slight outliers, and honestly, they don't even cover, like, the majority of the water. So, it's a very small thing, but for my number 3 con, I have just the overall annoying monotony of water type routes, especially with the fact that the majority of the Hoenn region is just water. Con number 2. For my number 2 con, this specific one builds directly off of the monotony of water type routes, but it's how many HMs are needed to progress in the game. There are a total of 6 HMs that you need to get through the game, but honestly, they feel so much more of a task just because of how much water there is. You need 3 water type HMs in order to actually get through the story and get all the extra stuff. You need Surf, you need Dive, and you need Waterfall. On top of that, you need Cut, Rock Smash, and Strength for the rest of the actual on-route areas of the game. And again, with these HMs, it makes team building and overall moveset creating just extremely limited. So with that being said, even though again it's another small complaint, the over-reliance on HMs is, it's a bit much, okay? So that's my number 2 con, which is the over-reliance of HMs. Dishonorable mention. Before we get to the number 1 con, I want to talk about one specific thing, and that is Mirage Island. Now look, as a concept, I think Mirage Island is really cool. An island, or just a whole nother part of the game that appears extremely rarely, is a very interesting and in certain cases can actually work, but it is implemented so poorly in this goddamn game. At most, you have a 3 in 65,000 chance of actually encountering it, or evening it out, it's like somewhere between like a 1 in 17,000, I believe. Don't quote me on that though. Point is though, it is extremely rare to get, and 9 times out of 10, you probably never even knew that this wasn't even a thing in the games. And what you even get at Mirage Island is also like extremely rare. You get to find a very rare berry, which is the Lychee Berry, which to be fair is actually a pretty solid item. And you also get to find Wynuts and Wobbuffets there. Again, really cool idea. It's just that the reward isn't as good as the actual risk or the rarity of that specific item. So if they put like more interesting Pokemon, like if they put more pseudo legendaries, or hell, maybe they could have put like a different structure or like a cave there for you to explore when you actually get to Mirage Island. What I'm trying to say is though is that Mirage Island was not, I wouldn't want to call it wasted potential, but it kind of is. It's just that it's extremely lackluster for what it actually was trying to be. And that is my honorable mention. Time to get to the number 1 spot. And the number 1 con for Generation 3 is the lack of a physical special split. Now, Generation 3 isn't the only Pokemon generation without the physical special split. We've had literally 2 prior generations of Pokemon without it. But this generation arguably suffers the most without it because of the new Pokemon introduced. And as a matter of fact, let's talk about some of these Pokemon that were introduced, okay? Let's just talk about them. You got Breloom. It has very good physical attack, but one of its main attacking types, which is Grass, is special type, and this thing has terrible special attack. Sharpedo, another good Pokemon with physical attack, but both of its stab typings are special. Crawdon, again, another Pokemon with a great physical attack, but both of its attacking types are special. Absol, probably the worst offender of this, a phenomenal physical attacking stat, but it has a special attacking stab in Dark. Metagross, phenomenal attack, but it has a special attacking stab in the Psychic type. Shiftry, great attack, mediocre special attack, 2 special attacking stabs. But on the flip side, you have Sputafly, which has really good special attack, but most of its moves are usually physical attacks. And for the final Pokemon, you have Medicham. It has overall mediocre stats, but with huge power and with a vast physical moveset, it's a physical attacker by nature, but one of its stabs being Psychic type is special attacking by nature. You see what I mean when I say that this generation arguably suffers the worst from the physical special split not being in the game? The majority of all of these Pokemon can be so much better if they had physical attacking moves that are designed with their attack. Like the Water type is a very special attacking heavy Pokemon type. The Dark type is another very specially oriented Pokemon type. I didn't talk about him, but Sneasel is very, very bad in this game, even though it doesn't appear in this game, because both of its attacks are special attack, and Sneasel has terrible special attack. The Generation 3 games are honestly an enigma between Pokemon fans. They're really, really good. This whole generation is extremely solid. The spin-offs are really good. The remakes of Gen 1 are really good. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald are arguably one of, if not the best mainline series games that the series has ever seen, with the Hoenn region being without a doubt the best region in the entire franchise. This generation is very, very solid and is in contention to probably being one of, if not the best generation of Pokemon of all time. It's not my personal favorite because I don't have that much sentimental value to it. I'm more of a Gen 4 person. And we'll get to Gen 4 eventually. Don't you worry about that. Like I said before, though, if I had to pick a consensus best generation of Pokemon, I'd probably pick Generation 3 because, if I'm being honest with you, it probably has, like, the least glaring flaws compared to every other Pokemon generation. Every other Pokemon generation has something that makes them problematic. Gen 1 is very old and clunky. Gen 2, you don't want to get started with Gen 2. Gen 4 is really slow. Gen 5, the Pokemon are really, really weird. And Gen 6 are really too easy. Gen 7, there's a lot of cutscenes and stuff. Sword and Shield sucks. We'll get to those when we get to those, though. But point is, Generation 3 has, like, the least glaring problems. Or, at the very least, it doesn't have one very big glaring problem when you go back and playing them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I had a lot of fun putting this video together. And I cannot wait to see you in the next video where I think I'm going to be talking about Generation 4 as my personal favorite generation. I think I'm going to be talking about that next. So, with that being said, you guys take care. I'm out.
Emerald. Can you go point, let them know that my hands really lethal? Like, how many times did I see you? Twice. Both of the times I just beat you. Text, clips, see through. I know you was mad when you see that we peeped you.